Yeah, so within every agent's career, we get what's called the NICS case. Now, a NICS case is what stands for the National Instant Check System. So when someone goes to purchase a firearm, the way it works in Texas is that you go to the gun store, you fill out the paperwork, it asks you something along the lines of have you ever been convicted of a felony, right? Uh, so in this case, I think the guy came in on maybe a Friday afternoon, and he fills out the form, and he says no, he's never been convicted, right? So then that thing gets sent off to the FBI to do the background check. Now, keep in mind, this is probably a Friday afternoon. It's late in the day. The FBI has essentially 3 days to determine whether or not this person is prohibited, right? And if they don't get it back within 3 days, by the time Monday rolls around, the dealer can actually give the gun to the individual, right? Because if they can't get it within 3 days, that's the way the law is written. The individual can come pick the gun up. So this guy gets the gun, right? So in the course of their investigation, the FBI determines that, in fact, this guy did have a felony conviction, right? And I think what happened in this case is they had to go back to the clerk's office, and the clerk had to go into the warehouse to find the files from a 1962 conviction for horse thievery. So this guy had a horse thievery conviction from like 1962 in Texas. The way we typically handle these cases is the way I would handle them is I make a phone call to the individual, say, look, sir, how are you? This is who I am, Special Agent Boehning with ATF. You remember when you purchased that revolver in this case from the local pawn shop? Well, as it turns out, you still have a conviction from 1962 for horse thievery. And in this case, the guy said, wow, geez, he said, I thought that kind of went away after a certain period of time. I didn't even know that would stick around. And that was so long ago. And the guy lived an absolutely, spectacular life. I mean, he had no criminal history after that. So from 1962 is when he has this horse thievery conviction. So I explained to him, I said, well, sir, we have three options. One, I can come get the gun. Two, I think, no, what did I tell him? I said, one, you can give the gun to it, you can take it back to the place that you bought it, right? So you got three options. One, you can take it back to the place that you bought it. Secondly, you could give it to a third party, maybe another family member, and we can do some paperwork that kind of establishes that. Well, thirdly, and lastly, I can come get it. He said, well, the gun was only about $35. Why don't you come get it? I'm like, well, okay. Now, this guy lived way south of Houston, so it was quite a haul to get down here. But I remember going to his house, and I walk into his house, and the first thing I see in the living room is this gun case, right, with like stacks of guns in there, left and right, old hunting rifles, that type of stuff. And it's on display, and it's in a glass case, and there must have been 20 or 30 firearms there. And I remember, saying, well, let's talk about the gun in question, which was, of course, the revolver. And he says, yeah, here it is. It's just a 38 special. I just didn't have one. I want something for personal protection. I'm like, okay. So he gets the gun, and I make him sign the form. And he says to me, what about all my other guns? I'm like, what guns? He said, all those other guns in the case. I'm like, oh, you mean your wife's guns? His wife was sitting right there. She's like, no, those are my guns. I'm like, no, I think those are your wife's guns. And they're in the lock and key, and she's the only one with care, custody, and control of those firearms. And she catches on. It's like, yeah, those are my guns. He's like, oh, yeah, those are her guns. So yeah, so it just goes. I mean, the bottom line and the point I'm trying to make is that, we're not out to get everybody's guns.
Yeah.
So the perception that ATF is about to take people's guns is certainly not the case. Now, probably if I was still working, I get jammed up for that. But the point of the matter is, I think a lot of times when you're working the streets like we did, and you deal with a lot of violent guys, I mean, you have to kind of establish, thresholds for what kind of stuff you're going to take. So that, in my opinion, would have been purely harassment, nothing more. So yeah, I took the revolver that he bought illegally, and we kind of went from there.